In the workplace, there's something called KPIs, which is key performance indicators. And oftentimes we work on this year in and year out to say, this is what I want to achieve in my job for this particular period of time. And then you work out the different milestones to actually achieve this KPI, key performance indicator. And I want to call this your goal. You actually work out different milestones to achieve your goal. What will end up happening between you and your manager, you would have said, you know what? Why don't I go for this particular training or that particular coaching to sharpen my skills for me to achieve this particular milestone? Have you ever been there? Have I been the only one that's been there? I'm going to share with you in this video how that narrative played out for me outside of work. Welcome to my channel. My name is Genevieve Stafford Jack. I found this, it's almost purely by accident. So I don't even want to take any sort of genius accolades for this one. But I found when I was in the workplace, this is what we would do. Quarter one, we'll do this. You must do all these goals. In your second quarter, you do all these goals. In your third quarter, you do all these goals. And in your fourth quarter, when you want to get to this particular KPI that we have been talking about for the entire year, for you to get this splendid, say, 10% raise on your income, when we do this, this is what you're going to get. But what tended to happen with me as at some point in work, Popo hits the fan in business. In your second quarter, you don't get the milestone. In your third quarter, you don't get your milestone. In your fourth quarter, you are scrambling. Why? Because there's 10% on the other side of this KPI. And then eventually you remember, by the way, I did go for training in this first quarter. Has any of it been beneficial to me? It was nice to be out of the office, but can I recollect what was happening in this particular training? And then you sit down during the time where they're going to talk about this is the raise that you're going to get. And then you don't end up getting this 10% raise. Instead, you get something below inflation. You go home, you're angry, you're cheesed up with the world, and you say, I've got the worst manager in place because they don't realize how hard I worked during the second quarter, how hard I worked during the third quarter, and now they've got the nerve and the audacity to give me a measly, even below inflation increase when we settled on 10% or we settled on a new role or added roles and responsibilities. You know what I found is that sometimes I had gone into training, and because I saw this vicious cycle, my training that I'd gone for something new, I got it, I grasped it, but I dropped it. I got stuck. It didn't seem like I could get out of there, so I dropped it. Okay? And then I got myself frustrated in the cycles of life and in the cycles of business. By the time the year came to an end, I realized some of the goals that I wanted to achieve within my business, I didn't achieve in my business. Therefore, I didn't get what was on the other side of what I promised myself in my own business. And then I remembered that training, and then I tried to squeeze some of the lessons and the epiphanies I thought I remembered from that training into the last quarter, and it failed, and it frustrated me even further. And that's when I started realizing some of my business goals that I wanted to achieve, I didn't achieve because I took some of this employee mindset of constantly not meeting the KPI, and then whether it is true for external situations that happened during the course of the year, or whether I was lazy, or whether whatever the scenario was that stopped me from achieving certain things to roll up to this 10%, to roll up to this new role, I then realized until I fix my mind here about goals, then it's going to look very different. And this is what I did from a business point of view, right? I had said to myself, for me to achieve the goals that I want, I need to go in and look at the year in 90 days. Look at the quarter 90 days. In my first 90 days, if I've done, and in this example, let's take a training so that I can refine processes in my business, right? If I go and I do a training, and this training may have come with things that I need to action, right? So what did I do from the training? All my actionable steps, my actionable stuff, I put together and I applied it. And as I applied it, I continued to expand on it. And when I was expanding on it, I went back to the training. Repetition is powerful. And then when I looked at the training, I looked at what I first put together and what I've expanded. I had other epiphanies on this particular training that I had actually gone through. And in this loop of 90 days, the more I went back to the training and I continued to take actionable content out of there, right? By day 80, I would have had a reminder that came up for me that said, beep, 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 beep. It's day 80. What have you been doing with the training? What have you been doing with the investment into yourself, which inevitably is going to grow business, right? When I had that reminder come up, I literally would say, okay, cool. In the next 7 days, when can I take 3 to 4 hours? What am I going to do with these 3 to 4 hours? I'm going to reflect and I'm going to look for the actionable steps that I had, and I'm going to see what came out of these actionable steps. Have they truly become parts of who I am within my business? And when I start seeing this particular cycle, then I'm very, very happy that here comes day 90, and my goal of why I invested in training in myself to maybe automate something within my business, how has it panned out? And if it hasn't panned out, for whatever reason what was going on here, I asked myself, can I set intentions and reminders each day? Go back 15 minutes. Listen to one thing for 15 minutes. That's all. What can I action from there? Before I get to a point where I am so frustrated. And this is how I learned that while I wasn't achieving some of my goals, I was still sitting in that KPI mindset that I had before coming into business. But in business, because so many things as a solopreneur, entrepreneur, that you are on your lonesome, you may have people that you contract from time to time to help you with certain components of the business, but you're not going to be having a staff meeting and everyone that pitches up to your staff meeting is me, myself, and I type of vibe. There's always going to be the three of you, right? You ask yourself, this investment, what could it have done for my business if I'm not applying it? And I would not move from there until my first 90-day cycle came right. The first time, it was not 90 days. The first time I decided to look at my time, instead of in quarters, I look at it in 90 days. The first time I must have sat on something like at 120 days that my first 90-day cycle came fine. And I said to myself, I'm okay. I'm not going to look too far and get myself into analysis paralysis. What am I going to do in the next 90 days? Albeit, my first 90 days actually took me 120 days. Albeit, I'm 30 days out. It's fine. What am I going to do in the next 90 days? And the more I thought of, what is my next 90 days? What is my next 90 days? Am I putting these things into action? If I haven't put it into action, I'm not leaving from here. I'm not leaving from here. And when I'm not leaving from here, and I remind myself that it's okay to go back to the training that you invested in yourself with. It's okay to have some measure of repetition. It's okay to go back and really understand what made you miss the mark in application. And when I started doing that, my first 90 days took me 120 days. My next 90 days took me 100 days. My next 90 days took me 95 days. And eventually I got to a point when I was at 90 days. But in hindsight, when I look back and I just think to myself, well, in the grand scheme of life, with these 90-day cycles, I'm only almost 40 days late. So was I late? No, it was some sort of thing in my mind that I tripped over at that time, that I learned, oh, I hadn't been achieving my goals because of these KPIs and all the excuses and the anger that was going on in my mind, until I changed the recipe. When I changed the recipe, I asked myself, am I 40 days too late? Or am I in time with the goals that I have put together for my business? So what I tend to do is that when I go on business training or anything for my business, I look at it as a 90-day cycle. What could I do in this 90-day cycle that when I look back in 90 days to see what I've achieved, I start looking at all the different goals that I've achieved. I start looking at things a lot differently, because then I see what I've achieved versus what I haven't achieved. And because I put myself into a situation that your next 90 days is going to be impacted until you complete this. And you bring up all the achievements that you are wanting for your business as an entrepreneur. And that is also the same recipe I eventually worked within my property business. So I get to a point where doing sourcing, I got to a point where doing business, everything happened in 90-day cycles. And in fact, a silly story, the coaching that I offer is in a 90-day cycle. It's actually quite fascinating because, again, like I said, I tripped over this notion. But when I really looked at it, what I do is twice a month, I meet those that are going through coaching with me. And sometimes it's 3 times a month, depending on when we would have met, right? So all in all, when somebody goes through a cycle of coaching with me, it's almost on the 90-day mark. And when we do end of the coaching and we start looking at where we started to what we were doing, to what they've applied, to what they've achieved, we then start seeing when you started where you were, but where you are right now, it's a collection of information that you applied over a period of time that created your own blueprint. And I find that's the fascinating thing about achieving goals, is that you need to find a recipe. And sometimes, even if it's a recipe that doesn't work, that hasn't been tried, but try it just so that you can understand, how can I do things differently so that you can achieve the things that you want to achieve, and start identifying the things that you haven't been achieving and fixing that and really putting it into a different perspective. And in terms of mindset, I just would like to encourage you and welcome you that I have got a playlist that really talks about mindset. And it talks about all things mindset around property investing. And maybe somewhere along this particular playlist, you may find something interesting. So will I see you over in this particular playlist where we start talking about mindset shift, things that we can do differently.